as most of you probably already know who I am, I'm Thomas, and I'm leading on a project, a Pan-Wales project called the Year of Smart Towns project. And this is a project that's supported and funded by the Welsh Government to try and encourage towns across Wales to think of ways they can use technology within their towns to produce data that can be valuable in terms of making decisions for that towns that can potentially lead to economic growth within those towns. And in addition to this project, the Welsh Government has also been generous in offering equipment, footfall counting equipment to local authorities in the form of a Wi-Fi router or access point that can provide Wi-Fi internet access to a town or public area, but also have features within to measure footfall and location analytics as well. So I'm very pleased to be joined today by Steve from Cisco. Unfortunately, we can't see Steve, but he is here and he is going to give us a presentation today about the equipment that has been sent to the local authorities. So please, for those of you who work for the local authorities and have received this equipment, please use this opportunity to ask any specific questions that you might have. Hopefully, most of them will get answered in Steve's presentation today anyway, but at the end, there'll be a 10-minute session where we'll be able to ask any questions that you might have to Steve as well. Okay, so with that being said, Steve, if it's okay, I'll hand it over to you.
That's fine. Thomas, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Good stuff. Good morning, everybody. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Thomas. So Steve Scarr, I work at Cisco Meraki as my role is technical solutions architect, and I look after, from an account perspective, the vast majority of public sector, including local government and healthcare. And Thomas kindly invited me along here today just to give you an overview. I'll begin with an introduction into Cisco Meraki for anybody on the webinar who's not familiar with us as a business entity, and then we'll have a quick overview of the equipment that was provided to yourselves, and then just to look through some of the value add capabilities of the equipment that would help various different local authorities with additional insight into the wireless users. So I'm just going to attempt to share my screen for a second's time, and caveat, first time did work, and the second caveat is that I do have my mobile burglar alarm patrolling behind me, and if the postman does arrive, which is his time, beware, the dog will be back in the background, but apologies for that. So just going to share my screen here, and then Thomas, if you could just let me know if you can see the beginning of my slide deck.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
So welcome everybody. So like I said, I'll start off with an introduction into Meraki. So about nearly 10 years ago, Meraki were acquired by Cisco to effectively augment their cloud managed networking product line. So with the acquisition, it was Cisco's intention to give Cisco customers true freedom of choice as to how they wanted to consume their IT. Did they want to consume it via an on-premise model using the Cisco Catalyst products, or if for organizations that had a cloud-first strategy, was looking to minimize the amount of on-premise control hardware required, then there was the cloud-managed offering through Cisco Meraki. Now, we were a completely separate entity for 8 years prior to the acquisition as well. So we are, I think it's fair to say, the market leader in cloud managed IT. Some of the latest statistics that we've got from our marketing department is that we've now got over 350,000 unique customers globally. And the second figure is actually, the latest update from marketing is actually in excess of 5 million Meraki devices online. So we do have a considerable footprint within the industry. Now, we say that we are a complete cloud managed IT solution, and I think that's fair to say. It's true. So we started off with our access points, both the indoor and outdoor access points that you are sure are all familiar with. And then as the development cycle has progressed, we've looked at various other parts of the network, which, plainly speaking, would lend themselves well to, probably in my opinion, our most important product, and that's dashboard. That's the management utility that you use to manage the Meraki platform. So we saw addition of switching, firewall, and unified threat management devices with built-in SD-WAN, and then the latest iterations we've seen the ability to manage endpoints via dashboard, as well as smart cameras and IoT devices. Now, I've mentioned dashboard, which is one of a few touch points that Meraki customers can interface with their Meraki hardware. It's probably the most prevalent, and I've been Meraki just short of 6 years now. And for the first 3-4 years of my time at Meraki, dashboard was the only game in town if you wanted to interact with your Meraki hardware. But recent advancements in both our API platform, so the ability for customers to interface with the Meraki hardware using third-party software, as well as a mobile app, which is available in both the Play Store and the App Store. So if you wanted to manage your Meraki infrastructure on the go, then you can do so through the web app. Now, one of the constant statements I get back from Meraki customers, both new and existing, is around the visibility that we give our customers into how their network is being consumed. So from an initial management perspective, we'll give you insight into which access point the clients are connected to, information on how, from a quality of service perspective, how that client's connection to the wireless network is perceived, and then also how that client is consuming the network. So all of our access points are Layer 7 aware, and with the latest version of firmware. So for those of you who deployed your dashboards, if you want to, after the webinar, check that you're running R28, which is the latest stable release candidate for our firmware, we've used a new traffic analytics engine to understand which applications are being consumed on the network. So the original traffic analytics engine, we could identify over 200 unique applications. With the new traffic analytics available in R28, which utilizes one of Cisco's other product lines, a product called NBAR, we can actually identify over 1,500 unique applications. So that's constantly updated as well. So as you can understand, over a life cycle of a network, the top talking applications that were prevalent day one are unlikely to be the same top talking applications over the life cycle of the network. So those constant updates allow you to identify new application signatures. So for example, I'm sure it will come as no surprise to anybody on the call, but as a Meraki SE, I enjoy access to a full Meraki stack at home. I have 2 teenage daughters who were heavily reliant on YouTube traffic when I first deployed the network, but over the last 6 to 12 months, we now see TikTok coming through as one of the most prevalent applications. So that gives you an idea of how the consumption changes over the life cycle of the network. We also have the ability to interrogate the hardware through dashboard to understand from a troubleshooting perspective if there's any issues with the hardware itself or with the client's connection to the hardware. Now, an important distinction to make is that although our product is cloud managed, there is no client data that traverses our data center architecture. It's literally the management data between the APs and a dashboard. All of the other user data will traverse through the network as normal. Now, the beauty of our dashboard architecture is that it's ultimately scalable. There's no on-premise control software that means there is a glass ceiling on how far that network can scale. So for example, if you bought 50 access points and a management plane to facilitate those 50 access points, if you needed AP51, you wouldn't need to reinvest in the management plane. Dashboard will just scale as per your requirements. Apologies for the background noise, I did caveat out that the dog doesn't like the postman too much. As Meraki customers, with the license, we guarantee a SLA to yourselves for the availability of dashboard, the availability to manage your products. So that SLA guarantees dashboard is available for 99.99% of the time over an annual basis. Now, as it's a SLA between ourselves and our customers, if for any reason, and it hasn't happened in my tenure at Meraki, if that dashboard is unavailable for less than that SLA, then we will pro rata credit you back license time to match the unavailability of dashboard. So for example, if you lose dashboard for 3 days through the year and you had a renewal of the subscription license on the 10th of January the following year, we would actually credit you those 3 days onto that subscription term. So your renewal wouldn't actually be due until the 14th of January. All of our data centers are fully HIPAA and PCI compliant. We regularly have third parties carrying out security audits on our data center infrastructure. So it is highly secure. And if anybody's interested and wants to understand a little bit more about our data center architecture, you can go to that URL at the bottom of the page, to the trust page, where there is a wealth of information around our SLAs and the data center architecture. Now, one of the beauties of Dashboard is its ability to manage distributed IT. So as a local authority, you can build multiple sites within Dashboard and be able to quickly navigate from one site to the other, but still being able to see holistically across the entire Dashboard organization the health of your network. So as you can see from the image here, we've got a number of green, red, and amber icons. So we use the traffic light symbolism extensively through Dashboard, and it's a quick way of drawing a network admin's attention to perceived issues with hardware across the organization. It does support true zero-touch provisioning. If you haven't deployed your APs yet, you can post them off to site, as long as you've got somebody at that site who can connect an Ethernet cable to that access point. If it can receive an IP address, it will automatically connect to your native Dashboard organization. Now you can prepare the configuration for that device. When the device connects to Dashboard, it asks 2 questions. Okay, do I have a firmware update? And do I have a configuration update? So you can maintain firmware integrity across the entire network. And as new hardware comes online, it will strictly adhere to the network-wide firmware stipulation. And then it can download its configuration and start providing wireless services without any local intervention. Now, I've mentioned it already, but we do run a truly simple, all-inclusive licensing model. So you can, if you were in mind to extend your wireless footprint, you can simply add new hardware, new licenses to your Dashboard organization. There's various different subscription terms depending on how you want to, or which part of your expenditure you would like to use up. If it's an OPEX model, you can go for a rolling 1-year renewal, or from a CAPEX expenditure, if you wanted to invest in a long-term subscription, you can get 5, 7, and 10-year durations. Included in that license, as well as access to all of the feature and firmware updates. So there's a saying we have here at Meraki, which when I first heard it, I wasn't I'm not 100% comfortable saying that, but it does ring true. Day one, when you buy a Meraki product, that is the worst that product will ever be because of the feature velocity from our engineering department in San Francisco. It means that over the life cycle of that subscription license, that product will be continued to be improved with new features, not just to the hardware itself, but also to dashboard and the ability to manage that product. It also includes 24/7 direct access with Meraki support. So if you have an issue, you can raise a support call either via email or web chat, or if it's a critical issue, you can raise a call via the telephone numbers that are provided in the help menu on dashboard itself. Now, along with that access to Meraki TAC, we also provide advanced replacement to the hardware for the duration of that subscription license. So if for any reason the hardware fails and you ring up, speak to one of our Meraki TAC engineers and you say, my AP is on fire, and they say, well, could you send us a picture? And you send the picture and say, yep, that AP is on fire. Then we will send you an advanced replacement next day. Now, obviously, there are a few caveats. If the phone call is 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, so you've missed our London support team, and if I can get my date time right, you would be speaking to our support team in San Francisco. And then once it is next business day, so we will process that replacement on the next day, and it will be with you within 24 hours. So I did go over them initially, but just to review the Meraki platform, as I mentioned, you've got the Meraki access points. You have the ability to add other product franchises to that management platform. So from a value add perspective, over the life cycle of the subscription licenses, if you, for example, wanted to look into the ability to manage other parts of your network, say, for example, your firewalls or your switches, you are able to take advantage of the Meraki free trial process. So, for example, if you wanted to run a proof of concept to ensure that the smart cameras or the smart sensors were fit for your requirements, you can have a no obligation 60-day free trial of that equipment. You absorb them within that same management platform you have for your access points, and then you can run your own proof of concept to see if, from a use case perspective, the Meraki products fit with you. Now, moving across from the generalized overview, I just wanted to take this time to focus on the hardware that's been kindly provided to you, and then understand some of the value add benefits that you can realize day one. Okay, so Thomas, I'm looking for a nod here, but I believe it's been a mixture of the MR76 and the MR86 hardware that's been provided to the local authorities.
I think they're all the 86.
Good stuff. Okay, so the good news is that is the flagship Wi-Fi 6 outdoor AP. So it's fully conversant with the latest Wi-Fi standards. It is a high capacity AP. So from a throughput perspective and from a co-connected clients perspective, there is a lot of performance on that AP. It has the ability to provide in excess of 1 gigabit through its Ethernet connection. So you don't have an immediate bottleneck, because conceptually, with the Wi-Fi 6 technology and the number of spatial streams that the 86 supports, you can quite easily provide in excess of 1 gigabit wireless throughput. If you put that into a gigabit Ethernet switch, you are immediately introducing a bottleneck. Now, that's not to say that day one, if that is the case, these APs are underperforming, because Wi-Fi 6 as a standard requires that probably about 30% of your client mix needs to be Wi-Fi 6 capable for you to realize the true efficiency, benefits of the standard. So until you get to that type of client mix. And Wi-Fi 6 clients aren't massively prevalent outside of the high-end Apple, Samsung, MacBook devices. Now, if you look towards the bottom of the 86, you'll see two additional icons. So the 86 is part of what we call our quad radio architecture. So you have two radios that are dedicated to talking to its clients 100% of the time. They aren't required to do anything else other than serve the clients. So from an efficiency perspective, they are never asked to do what's called opportunistic scanning. So on some other vendors' APs, without a third radio that we have, the dedicated scanning radio, they have to do all of the management of a wireless network using those client-server radios. Whereas with the Meraki APs, because we've got that dedicated scanning radio, we can do all of the integral monitoring of a wireless enterprise network on that scanning radio without it having an effect to the connected clients. That scanning radio also forms a very integral part of some of the features that I'm going to lead on to talk about around the value add. And then last but not least, an icon that I'm sure the vast majority are familiar with, but we've got built-in BLE radio on the access point. The Bluetooth radio is there initially as a way of either tracking clients on the network. So the scanning API, which I'll go on to talk about, utilizes both the scanning radio and the Bluetooth radio, but also from a way of engaging with your clients as well. So again, using that BLE radio, you can track BLE clients. You can use location-aware location data to provide location-aware context. So that's an overview of the hardware. Now, I just wanted to talk about the capabilities of the location analytics that I mentioned earlier. Now, the first point that I want you to take away from this is that what I'm about to describe is built into the solution that you have now. There's no additional licensing required. There's no software uplift required. This is native in the solution that you have now. Okay. Now, the location analytics is integrated into every one of our Meraki APs, and it provides an ability for dashboard, that management UI, to basically understand from an RF perspective various different metrics such as footfall, traffic patterns. And then this data can then be leveraged by organizations for marketing or for staffing purposes. So the use cases are broad. Okay, what I'm going to talk you through now is just understanding what's supported natively within dashboard, and then the art of the possible utilizing third-party software, third-party products. So again, included in the solution you have now, you have the ability to track 3 location analytics. That's proximity. So how many wireless and Bluetooth devices are observed in your network over a particular time frame. The engagement measures the duration, the dwell time of those visitors they span in that wireless environment. So from some of the use cases that I've seen built out for these types of analytics, tracking the proximity, if you can then compare the data in your network against the data from another network that you are managing, you can understand, let's say, for example, you have a project where you want to provide some digital signage to the general public. You are managing 2 or 3 Meraki wireless networks. You don't have enough budget to provide this digital signage at all of those locations. So you're trying to understand, okay, for bang for buck, where will I get the most engagement with this digital signage? So the proximity graph will give you an understanding, okay, from a footfall perspective, where am I seeing the largest conurbation of users? How long do they spend? Okay, what is their dwell time when they access that site? And then from a repeat visits perspective or a loyalty perspective, how often are those devices seen returning? Now, I will share my slide deck with Thomas after the webinar. If you want to have a look through the slide deck, but also I've put in some useful links to supporting documentation to help you, again, from a follow-up perspective, just read through to understand these capabilities further. So I've reviewed my 2 or 3 Meraki networks. I can understand from a proximity perspective that my network down in Bridgend has the biggest number of visitors and passers-by. So I've identified that network as the network where I want to provide this digital signage. Now, I need to understand, okay, from a network perspective, where is the best location for that digital signage that's going to see the largest number of visitors. So the heat map, again, included in a dashboard. And I just want to make a quick point that all of this data is anonymized, okay? So there's no GDPR issues with the information that we retain in dashboard. It is all anonymized. What we give you here is, from a floor plan perspective, an idea of where the largest conurbations of your wireless clients are likely to be over a 24-hour period. So as you can see from this image, there's various different hotspots across that floor plan. This is going to help you identify, okay, on that network, that is going to be the best location for my digital signage in order to have as many visitors as possible see this digital signage. Again, there's a link to supporting documentation if you need to do any follow-up writing. Now, we're moving now from what's included in dashboard to the art of the possible using the scanning API. So the scanning API, it's the same data that we use within dashboard itself, but this is the ability now for a third-party software to take that information and add identity context to it, for example. So all of the APs will send these JSON posts to the analytics backend server, and it is a post that has a client data, receive signal strength, and a timestamp of that data, and that's constantly pushed from our APs to the third-party firmware. So if you were looking at this from, let's say, for example, an asset tracking perspective, because the data is anonymized in dashboard, you cannot locate a specific asset on our heat map. It's there, it's anonymized to give you an idea of where, from a footfall perspective, your hotspots are. But utilizing this scanning API, this data can now be sent to that third party and they can add identity context to that. So for example, if you were tracking some high value items, you have that data in this third party analytics backend, and we now have the location context provided to that analytical backend so that you can see, okay, well, I have my high value item, it's on the 3rd floor of my council office, and I can see that it's been there for the last 2 hours. Someone's borrowed it, but they haven't returned it. Other use cases that I've seen local government customers look into is engagement with your users. So let's think from a smart city perspective. You have various different areas within your town centre where you want to reinvigorate footfall into. You can take this location aware context. You can have an application created for your local authority. And as the user moves through, let's say, for example, a shopping centre or your town city centre, you can use this location-aware context to be providing location-aware context to that application. So can I entice you into this new business that has just recently opened its doors in the town centre? You've got an initiative with new businesses that you have a mechanism where you can provide engagement to customers to entice them to these business locations. I'm going past the new bookshop that's opened. You can have an alert pop up on this application saying, "No, I notice you're walking through our town centre, Steve. Can I direct your attention to this new bookshop that's just opened its doors? If you go now and use this voucher code that we've positioned to the application, you can stop and have a free coffee while you peruse the bookstore." So there's, like I said, a myriad. It's literally whatever you can think of where location data is valuable, you can use this scanning API for that use case. Now, one of the challenges I had as a Meraki employee when we first opened up this scanning API is that conversations like, okay, I appreciate it's very one-sided, this conversation, but conversations similar to this that I had with customers was, "Steve, that sounds great, but I don't have the time or the resources to build that application. Who do I engage with to build that application?" And at the time, the answer was, well, if you have a particular use case in mind, I might be able to speak to a couple of our technology partners to understand if they have an application that's fit for purpose. But what we've done over the last 12 to 18 months is build out our marketplace. So the marketplace is a number of ready to consume applications that have been built to be consumed within a Meraki network. So when you go to the Meraki Marketplace, which is again accessible from that drop-down menu in the help menu on dashboard, you can filter through your region and your use case. So for example, if you were looking at a safe practice of work so that the office staff could return to the government building post-COVID lockdown, there's various different applications that are ready to be purchased and consumed within your Meraki network without any development required in-house. But the flip side is also true. If you had resources in-house where you wanted to develop your own application just using the Meraki APIs, then if you go to create.meraki.io, there is a whole wealth of information on how you can build your own applications to interact with your Meraki network. There's various different codes that are ready for you to take advantage of, various different documentation and the tutorials and step-by-step guides on how to start your API journey with the Meraki portal. Now, I was a complete novice when it came to APIs before I joined Meraki. I'm by no means an expert, but there are a lot of very useful tutorials on here which really do help you start your journey if you wanted to look at designing your own interaction with the Meraki platform. Now, I mentioned you can build your own integration or you can consume these ready-to-use applications. What I've got here is basically an example of a third-party piece of software taking advantage of that scanning API. Now, this, for the eagle-eyed amongst you, or for the people that are familiar with using it, this is Cisco WebEx Teams. And what I have is a bot within WebEx Teams, which is going to interrogate my Meraki network from an API perspective. So I've asked it to list the assets, and it's come back with 2 assets that are present on the network. And I've said, okay, well, as a healthcare customer, my defibrillators are very high value items. They're always going walkabout. I would like you to find that defibrillator for me. So I've initiated another command that the software has interpreted and said, okay, well, it needs to focus on the location of the defibrillator. We know the MAC address of that asset, and using the unilateration between the Meraki APs on the network. So this is a case of the defibrillator is in this room. I've got 4 APs in that room. They can hear that device varying different signal strengths. Providing the overlay coverage, we anticipate that that device is in this location here. And if you notice at the bottom that I've just highlighted, where it says click here for live tracking, there is a hyperlink there, and that takes me to the third-party software that shows me that device moving through the network. So if you're trying to locate an asset that is mobile, while you're sending a colleague down there to find this asset and it's moving, you can observe that device moving through the network. So when you get there, you're not on a fool's errand because the asset has left the initial location. Now, I know, I'll just need to take some water. I know we moved away from focusing on what was built into the solution we have already, but I just wanted to revisit that now and talk around guest engagement. Some of the things you could be doing from a best practice perspective to, again, utilize this hardware as best you can. And one of these is around guest engagement. So when you're designing your wireless SSIDs on your network, one of the options around a wireless SSID is what you would expect to see as traditional captive porting. So, you know, whenever you go into a coffee house and you connect to the Wi-Fi, before you can access your emails or browse the internet, you're met with that landing page where it asks you to put my teeth in, accept the terms and conditions. Now, you're perfectly capable of creating that through the Meraki captive portal. But the problem with just having terms and conditions that you block access until the user accepts is that you have no audit trail. You don't know who's using your wireless network. You only know that devices are agreeing to adhere to your terms and conditions. Now, traditionally, with a captive portal solution where you need a username and password, that does give you an audit trail. But from an admin task perspective, it's quite onerous. There's an overhead on yourselves to provide somebody create these usernames and passwords to gain access to the Wi-Fi network. So the best alternative is a feature we call self-registration. Now, as the name suggests, this allows a client to connect to the wireless network, provide some details that we in turn verify before they're allowed onto the network. So you can see here on the right-hand side, I just quickly mocked up this self-registration landing page. There's huge tutorials within Dashboard to help you build a customer-specific landing page, but it's asking for my credentials here. Now, when it comes to the email field, if I populate it with mmouse@disney.com, as sometimes users want to do to avoid that audit trail, it ultimately will exclude that device from the network because the email does have to be verified. So when that device connects to the SSID, we will give them 10 minutes of free access. But however, after those 10 minutes, if the client hasn't clicked on the verification email, so if they have provided incorrect details, then they will then be excluded from the wireless network. Now, what this gives you now is a database of users that are connecting to your wireless network that, should you so wish, you can actually use as a marketing database. So again, taking that example from a town Wi-Fi, when as a new visitor, I come to the town and I connect to this Wi-Fi service, and you haven't seen my details before, you can now follow up after my visit with a survey. What did you like about our town centre? What didn't you like about our town centre? Was there enough parking? What could we be doing better? And then again, you can follow up with additional enticements to that user to have them come back to your town centre. And the beauty of that scanning API is that when I do come back to your town centre, because it recognises my device, I can have a different journey the second time around from a wireless perspective than when I first did. So that you're never going to be met with the same captive portal saying, who are you? What do you need to see? Welcome back, Steve. Glad you've come back to our town centre. We know that you visited the bookshop last time because you accepted that voucher code. In the meantime, did you know that we've just had a chocolatiers open up their doors, and why don't you pop down there? They're doing free tasters today. So it gives you, from an engagement perspective, a different look and feel depending on whether it's a new visitor or a repeat visitor. Now, that's everything that I'd had prepared from you from a presentation perspective. So, Thomas, if we want to hand over to the Q&A chat window, is there anything that's been put in the window that I can answer?
Thank you very much, Steve. A lot of that I didn't understand, but I'm sure there's some IT specialists in the lobby that would and might have more technical questions than me. I just wanted to ask you a few. So whilst I ask these questions, please feel free to pop any questions that you might have in the chat. So one question I had, and it's a point you made right at the beginning, was the ability of these access points to monitor over 1,500 application traffic, unique applications traffic. Mm-hmm. And I think to have that data for a town would just be so, for businesses within a town, would just be so valuable to know what kind of applications are being used. So yeah, if one town in North Wales, the Cisco Meraki dashboard showed that 90% of their network is used by Facebook, then that information can be just extremely valuable to businesses that market through social media. It can show them that maybe don't waste as much time on your Twitter or your TikTok posts, because in your town it's pretty much Facebook that everybody's using. So the question that I had was, so you're able to get this data, but are you able to dive into it so that you could put maybe a specific date and time that you're interested in? Maybe you want to look at what the weekend data looks like. Is that possible?
It is, yeah. Yeah, so natively within Dashboard, we keep this information up to 30 days. After those 30 days, in addition to that, you have something that's called summary reports, which goes back up to 2 years in 6-month increments. And you can generate a report over a specific time frame to understand from an application perspective which were the top talking applications over that time frame. Another thing to also add on around the Facebook analogies, when I was talking about the captive portal configuration and that self-registration, another option is if you took this information from Dashboard, like you mentioned, and you saw that Facebook was by far the most prevalent social media application on the network, you can actually have, as part of the login process, a redirect to the town's Facebook page, where you have to like the Facebook page before you're authenticated onto the network. So I go to Bridgend for the day, and my friends and colleagues on Facebook see that I go there, and I've connected to the Facebook page there. And so obviously now they're understanding, well, Steve is a man of discerning taste, and he's going to spend his weekend down in Wales. Maybe I'll go and check it out as well. So then you get in the additional interaction with your social media platform.
A follow-up on that, really, in terms of the sign-in page, because the example that you showed, you ask for an email address and name and all the kind of common questions. But would a network have the capacity to form their own questions if, example, they might be interested in knowing the reason for someone's visit? Could you add a question in with a drop-down list of why did you visit, or why did you log on to our network?
So what you would do in that circumstance is, another one of our APIs we have on the platform is called the Captive Portal API. So you could build your own captive portal or have a third party build your own captive portal. And then the Meraki SSID just redirects to that captive portal. So then the look and the feel can be completely personalized. You can have the look and feel, the name, all the questions populated on that form. So yeah, it's possible to carry out a relatively high amount of customization natively in dashboard. But if you wanted truly something bespoke, then you can, utilizing that captive portal API, redirect to a third-party landing page.
Yeah, I think I know of some examples where public Wi-Fi networks have done that, redirect people to another login page where, or not a login page, but like a survey page where other questions were asked. I do have some more questions, but I see that there are some questions coming in through the chat and also the Q&A function. So I'll try my best to make my way through these. There's one question that's come in through the chat about the ability of Apple devices to scramble MAC addresses. And with this, would the API notice a return visitor with a view to interact with the clients?
Yeah, okay. So if that device was what we classify as a passerby, so this is a device that we've observed on the wireless network but hasn't connected to the wireless network, then yes, we, like any other vendor, would struggle with providing identity context to that device, because the way Apple and Samsung and the Windows devices work is that they will randomize their MAC address. So next time I come to the town center, if I haven't connected to the Wi-Fi, my device will be beaconing with a different MAC address. However, if I connect to the network, then Apple and Android and Windows have options to effectively disable that randomization. So you will always use the same MAC address to connect to that Wi-Fi network. It's not the actual physical hardware address. It is a hashed variant of it, but it will always be the same constant MAC address if I've connected to the wireless network. So that again then allows you to provide identity to that device. But like I said, if it hasn't connected to the network and it's just walking through connected to the 4G or 5G network, then we would see it as a different device when it came back.
Yeah, okay. And do you know, I know of this fact as well, that they scramble, but is that something that happens like every 24 hours? Do you know, or?
No. So it will scramble every time. If it hasn't connected to that network, every time it probes into the network, it will use a different physical address. But like I said, if you connect to the network, the next time it reconnects, it will use the same physical address that was generated for that SSID profile.
Okay, and just for some of the people in the audience that might not be aware, for the location analytics that you showed on the dashboard, that doesn't necessarily depend on people connecting, just as you've explained there. A passerby or even a visitor that was there for over an hour, they didn't have to connect to the network to become a visitor on the location analytics dashboard, do they?
No, they don't. No, as long as we observe them probing one of the access points on the network, because when you've got your phone in the pocket, the Wi-Fi is enabled, it's constantly probing out saying what wireless networks are out there, even if you haven't physically said I want to join that wireless network. And
correct me if I'm wrong, but did you also say that it would pick up Bluetooth signals?
It will, yeah. So that BLE radio, so the scanning API as well as looking for wireless connected or wireless transient users. It does the same on a Bluetooth perspective as well.
And so if you had someone who had a smartphone and they'd have their Wi-Fi on looking for Wi-Fi and their Bluetooth looking for Bluetooth, would that come up as two people?
It would initially come up as two people, but there are algorithms running in the background for looking for coordination between a BLE MAC and a Wi-Fi MAC. So understanding from a received signal strength from a location perspective, there's an algorithm looking for common patterns between those two devices. So there is a body of work done on the back end to clean up that data to understand if there are effectively, like you said, two physical MACs for one device.
Yeah, because I imagine that if that wasn't in place, every town with these devices would look that way. Yeah. Heaving. Okay, I know there's another question as well from an app developer. So they're looking into developing an app for a town, and the Cisco Meraki access points have already been installed in a town, and was wondering if the Cisco Meraki dashboard, could they use an API to use the data from that dashboard to be displayed on their app?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if, for example, there's two different APIs that third-party applications commonly interface with. That's the configuration API. So rather than giving access to dashboard to, for example, build a new wireless SSID, I will allow a third-party utility to place an API call into dashboard and build that configuration. And then the second one is that app developer taking for example, the scanning API, or if it's from one of the MV security cameras, it could be a webhook or an MQTT subscription. You can basically then hive data from dashboard and interpret that in the application. So that scanning API is providing location-aware context to my device, and then the application knows that I'm outside the bookshop or I'm outside the new chocolatiers, and then that location-aware context can then drive content on the application.
Okay, yeah, I think that answered the question. But with regards to the actual the graphs that you showed and the figures, could that also be displayed on a third-party app?
It could, if they were summarizing it the same way we are on dashboard. So they couldn't actually input that graph or that data into their platform. What they'll be getting is the raw data stream that we take from dashboard and then render in those graphs. So they're getting the same data, but it would be down to their application to interpret that data and build the graph themselves.
Okay. I'm not sure if that did answer your question, Steve, but I hope it did. One more question from me, I believe, and I know we've got 4 minutes left, so I'll ask this one, but if anybody does have any more questions, please do use this opportunity to ask Steve while we have him, or alternatively as well, please feel free to email me with any specific questions that weren't answered today, and I'll make sure to pass them on. And my final question is to do with adding more access points onto a network. So all the local authorities have received a set amount of access points, and they've had a 10-year license courtesy of the Welsh Government. If they were to extend their network either in the town that they've chosen to deploy the ones that they have, or put a new network in another town, or new access points within another town, would they need an additional license, or would the same license cover those access points?
So the answer to both those questions is yes, and I'll provide context now. So if you added APs but no licenses, what you would do then, so dashboard works on what's called a co-termination date. So this is all my hardware, these are all my licenses, but you just get one renewal date. And there is an algorithm runs in the back end that says, okay, your dashboard license needs renewing on this date. Now, if you add new hardware but no licenses, it will draw down on that 10-year license. So, for example, it will look at the 8 APs for 10 years, and when you add these new devices, if you don't add a 10-year license, so for example, you bought a 5-year license, there would be a drawdown on that initial 10-year license and say, okay, well, between the two licenses, you will get a co-termination date of somewhere in between. Okay, so effectively what you're seeing is you're seeing an uplift on the 5 years that you've just bought, but you also see a drawdown on that 10 years, and it would meet somewhere. Let's say, for argument's sake, you get 7.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I'm just aware of some towns that, following on the offer from the Welsh government, they've got other towns within their county that would really benefit from having this technology in place in there, so that they're able to collect all of this data. So I thought it was worth asking that question on behalf of some of the local authorities who are considering purchasing more, to take into consideration if you are buying some. Also consider the length of license that you will be buying for the additional ones, because obviously from the answer, whatever license you choose to buy will have some effect on other access points you do purchase. Okay, then it is coming up to 1 o'clock, and I don't see any additional questions coming in. So I'd just like to thank all of you for attending today, and I hope most of the content has been very useful for you. I'll make sure to share the slides and also share the recording with everybody who's registered for the event. And also to thank you as well, Steve, for giving up your time today and for answering all the questions as well.
No problem. Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.